live from Cultura Media House. Powered by 786 Sports. It's El Big League Show with Adrian Lorenzo. And now batting, here's Danny Enriquez.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to El Big League Show. Happy Monday. Got a lot to talk about as we get into the home stretch. Minor leagues, guys going up, guys knocking on the door. A lot to talk about in the world of baseball. To do that, we have to bring on, as always, two-time World Series champion, former MLB exec, Adrian Lorenzo. Adrian, how we doing?
What's up, Danny? Good to see you, man. Good to see you on the verge of, or on the heels of another Hurricanes victory. You must be flying high.
Yeah, I played great, right? No, it's fun to watch. Obviously better when the team's playing well.
Yeah.
A lot of teams feeling that right now on this playoff stretch, getting ready for the postseason. The Houston Astros, I want to start there, Adrian, because a lot of teams thought these guys were going to go away, hoping maybe they were going to go away. Fans, rivals, they're still doing it, man. As we record this, a 3.5 game lead in the NL West, and really it's been the pitching staff. Number one in pitcher war, number two in pitcher war, 17.4. Philly only one ahead of them at 21.8. So been on the mound. What do you see from the Astro staff here?
We spoke about the Brewers being holistically built, and the Astros are pretty holistically built as well. They're just well positioned. They're one of the more underrated compositions to me in terms of net wins and lead your division. And I think the Houston Astros have figured out ways to win baseball games for a good stretch of time now, including with a lot of players throughout here, some more experienced players scattered throughout here. There's something to the momentum of winning, in my opinion. Like the Houston Astros have been on the momentum side. They've had momentum when it comes to winning at a high level in Major League Baseball, in polarizing ways sometimes, but just overall, I think they've been just incredibly effective at winning baseball games over like 162, then actually closing out a postseason and turning that into championships. But here they are again, leading their division this far into a season, in a division with a good Seattle team and a good Texas team. Texas has been playing good baseball now. I think they're a game and a half out of the wild card. But it's kind of been them as the top dogs in the AL West for a little while now. And I think that has now carried over into a different front office regime, so to speak, right? Like they moved on from James Click and then decidedly went in a kind of a scouting heavy, after having a very analytically driven, upbringing to that point, and then have flipped over into a kind of really scouting heavy system in terms of like their general manager comes from the Braves kind of system of scouting players that's really athlete targeted and scouting targeted. So they've survived a few waves of turnover and are still in the lead in the NL West here this late into the season. So it just felt, as I was looking at the landscape of teams to spotlight, and there were a few good candidates, some that we've already covered. So to just give a range to the show that's different, the Astros stood out for this week because they're not built like the other teams necessarily, but they are built in a way that works for them.
Yeah, one theme, and obviously I got the script, so I've been able to see some of the players we're going to talk about, Miami Marlins players, New York Mets players, but there are a couple themes that emerge as some of the players we're looking at. And I'm seeing a lot of cold weather guys who really blossom late across all the guys we're going to look at over the course of the show. And then a lot of north-south guys, guys with rise on their fastball, maybe a nice little curveball. Hunter Brown hits both of these.
Yeah.
Big physical guy from Michigan, Wayne State, Detroit. Grew up watching Justin Verlander. One of the best pitchers in baseball this year. Second best fastball runs above average in baseball. Brian Wu being number one. Another guy that was mid-round pick. Brown drafted in the 5th round. Kind of worked his way up here. But you look at the numbers, it's outstanding. Big physical guy, been on an upward trajectory. How did Hunter Brown go from 5th round pick, Wayne State, to a player that is on top of the sport.
He's the ultimate 2025 modern era, kind of how you want to draw it up kind of pitcher, right? Then it happens to be found in kind of an undervalued, under-scouted at Wayne State. Like it comes in a bit of a different package, but that doesn't mean that it's not equally effective in today's game. I think he's a model of him and Brian Wu. And it's interesting that both those two guys are at the top of that leaderboard. But fastball runs above average, basically like total effectiveness, your fastball is 2 runs above the major league average. You're just the fastball alone. I'll go into the curveball because by far he's best curveball in the game too. So true north-south. But in terms of a vertically moving 4-seam fastball, it feels like and Brian Wu you can say this as well. It's not just velocity driven. There's some velocity behind it, but it's that, if you would put the movement grade on the fastball, you'd put it closer to the top of the scale, 70s, 65 plus, at least pure fastball movement from Hunter Brown is what I'm deducing based on just what I'm looking at here. And then he couples that with what I think is far and away like the best curveball in terms of actual effectiveness. Same thing I talked about, like runs above average, like with Hunter Brown's curveball in a day and age of a lot of sliders, cutters, sweepers. You hear those terms as part of the profile more than true 12-6 curveball. But if you have the raw spin behind it, you can throw a power curveball, it can be effective at the top of the league. What does he net out at, like a top 4 pitcher in the game, right? In terms of, the power ranking of number 4 overall in baseball with that exact profile. He's just a true modern day ace for the reasons that scouting departments and analytic groups kind of chase it. And it's a good delivery. There's no, I don't know. It all works.
It's interesting you talk about that, the curveball north-south. As we record this, we just saw Yamamoto go basically an out away from having a no-hitter with his curveball and some of the north-south things that he can do. He's got a whole repertoire. But you mentioned the combination of analytics and traditional scouting with a guy like Hunter Brown. Let's go to the traditional scouting side, not so much the TrackMan stuff. Assume the TrackMan wasn't invented yet.
Sure.
Cold weather guy like this, big body, good athlete, good frame, all that kind of stuff. You talk about the delivery. Just from your physical scout, your traditional scout of this player, what do you like about him? And in general, and I'm going back to this. Well, before we even get to the background of him, just what you see on the film with the delivery and with the body type. What do you like?
I would grade a lot of that out as like fair to average, fair to better, right? Just in terms of it's not a super hyper dynamic, hyper flexible, hyper explosive delivery, just kind of pretty traditional. And it's actually kind of, there's a little bit of violence toward the end there, at least on this pitch with a bit of a head whack in terms of just effort to it. And he's able to get away with it with really good command, but a lot of guys that last like effort right at the end there where the head kind of dunks and dips, for him, it functions and it works good. For some guys, it allows command to kind of be just a really violent move toward the end. So this is not a knock on Hunter Brown at all. I think it's a fair to better delivery, and he's repeated it extraordinarily well. The other thing that stands out is that fastball and that curveball come out from pretty much that same pocket with some effort. So there's to me, I think he's got some deception-based stuff because it's kind of slow, quick. And then it's extreme 4-seam ride, so it gets on you quick. And then go to the breaking ball, just so that I'm not. No, sorry.
A lot of red.
Yeah, a lot of red. Surprising amount of sinker usage too. So that's really interesting as well. Him getting effectiveness on that fastball to side, not just 4-seam. So it's pretty much 40% 4-seam, 20% sinker. So pretty much anything that he's missing a lot of bats, and he's putting everything else on the ground, and he's not walking anybody. It's kind of all the bases you really need to cover your part as a pitcher. But then he's got the swing and miss stuff, which puts him into that different category. But it's interesting that he's using pretty good percentage and evenly distributed between sinker and 4-seam. I would have thought it was much more 4-seam heavy, but I guess that makes sense too. So going to the curveball though, the curveball, best curveball in baseball here, runs wise. It's same slot for me. Same delivery, same slot. One's 96, 97. The other one is just a bottoming out breaking ball. that he could probably land for strikes in early counts too. I'm wondering how much more he goes to it for bat misser instead of like strike establisher. A big curveball like that can also be, it can throw you off early in counts. It's not breaking balls aren't pitches you want as a hitter. You don't want to make, like, you want to be a really good fastball hitter. Some hitters are better breaking ball hitters than fastball hitters, but it's like in the minority of hitters that want to live feasting off breaking pitches. So just a big shaped breaking ball like that it's just harder to hit. It bottoms out. Some sliders stay on the bat path. And so I think you'll see that's why slider is just a shorter, more horizontal pitch, which has some benefit. And especially if you could bottom that out, because if not, you kind of stay on the same bat path as a left-handed swing, or a right-handed swing even, right? You throw a right slider to a right-handed hitter, it goes out, but like if you follow the trace of the bat, that's on bat path too. So sliders, I see why they're more common, but here in this context, I see why his is more, it's kind of get under the bat, get over the bat with the fastball, get under the bat with the curveball, trying to like distill it down as simple as I can here. So it all tracks as to why he has elite value in the game. But the delivery, I can see how he falls to the 5th round, for example. It's not, at least just looking at it without seeing the total data, amateur data in front of me, I'll bet, because the Astros selected him in 2019, that he was buoyed by a lot of really strong analytic characteristics, including with the 4-seamer and the breaking ball. So for an amateur scouting department, 5th round, 166 overall pick in that, 2019 draft, to have an ace level starter out of that range of the draft, you feel good about that.
Now, you were international for a lot of your career. Not a lot of cold weather scouting involved in that process, but
no.
I mentioned at the top, we're going to talk to Thomas White about in a second here. Jonathan from Canada, Thomas White from the Northeast.
Mm-hmm.
So a guy like this who's from Detroit, Michigan, knowing what you know about the amateur process, you've been around some old school scouts that, have been around for a while, dealt with these kids for a long, long time. I know Stan Meek's someone that you value his opinion quite a bit.
Yeah.
Like, how do you approach these cold weather guys in terms of upside, maybe things that aren't there presently that you say, well, when we get him down here and he's full-time down here, we might get X, Y, Z?
Yeah. I think what makes me think of that is I worked for a man by the name of Gary Denbo that was from Indiana, right? Middle of Indiana, rural Indiana, and was as baseball freak as you could think of him. As baseball, like, freak is the wrong word, but it's more like he energized around baseball so fervently that it didn't matter if that's not a traditional place where a ton of baseball is being played. Enough is in those pockets. And Derek Jeter, for example, is from up there in Michigan, Kalamazoo, Michigan as well. So
Don Mattingly, who you worked with as a
there
manager.
You go. So there's not only precedent, but it makes sense. Like, great players can come from anywhere. To me, we're seeing a big Hawaiian push right now, a big Pacific Northwest push, a big Northeastern push between Jersey, Boston, Thomas White that we're going to talk about. Like, Michigan is its own pocket.
Yep.
With really good baseball being played. Like, the Big Ten baseball is still like relevant. Like, good teams come out of there, good players get drafted out of there. And stands to reason that even below that at the University of Michigan, Ohio State, that all those programs also have, good fervent baseball following. So the cold weather stuff, it's not going to deter the right kind of athlete from getting to baseball if he liked baseball anyway, or if he came up in a baseball family. And you're going to get there from everywhere. I was just talking on Un Podcast de las Mayores, which is the other show we do here on 786 Sports. And we were talking about Cuba and how from all corners you see impact players. And I think the United States is that as well with baseball, where like you can really find a path to major league success from anywhere. I think you got guys from Wyoming, you got guys from all over the place getting to elite level performances, payments, contracts at the major league level. And I think that's awesome. And this is another example of that. But Michigan is not like a cold pocket. It's a cold weather pocket, but it actually has like pretty rich baseball history overall.
And you drafted, not you personally, but you're part of an organization that drafted Max Meyer, number 3 out of Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, does it even come into the discussion in the room like, hey, this guy's not from one of these Southeastern or Texas or California baseball factories. We think there's meat on the bone here. We think he can develop in XYZ, or is it not something that really comes up other than just the general background?
It's a good question, because it does come up in terms of, okay, how often does this guy get to develop the thing that you need him to do 10,000 hours of, right? But I don't think that is indicative of an incapability to do those things at a high level athletically. I think it's, does that player find a way to get the reps, whether it be summer ball, whether it be, like pack it in somewhere, because the reps have to come somewhere in order for you to be developed enough. Some organizations can really shrink that amount of time, and that's where good player development systems come in. But it's I haven't seen it enough, when you're looking at him and you're evaluating him, like, can I trust this sample size? And they're usually smaller sample sizes, especially in those high school seasons up in the Northeast. Like, you can get, so it depends. It depends on, it's harder for them to get as many reps because of the seasonal nature of the way that they have to go about it as amateurs. But travel ball has gotten to a point where, like, you play on the right travel ball teams and you're willing to travel on weekends regularly, you're going to get seen as much as anybody on the circuit. Like Thomas White, for example, or Max Meyer. Like, there wasn't really much of a limit to access to seeing him. It's more like, how many reps, how many innings can you, like, rely on this to project as a starter? So sample size, really, but you give to me, you just give a little more patience with the players from colder weather areas and see, if that's just a reps issue that they haven't seen it. But I don't think that there are instinctual or skills limitations from other places in the country. So to me, a player can be great from Miami, a player can be great from Connecticut, from all these other places that we talked about. And some of those are very cold weather spots. So I've just seen enough precedents where maybe late bloomers across the board, if I can make a general broad statement, later bloomers. Yeah. But I think that's reps driven more than anything.
Yeah, we're seeing that with some of the names here on this list who are going to be two-way guys. Again, we got a nice list of pitchers that, as I look at it, very diverse backgrounds, but a lot of similarities. Move to the bullpen here with the Houston Astros, third best bullpen in Major League Baseball. Yeah. Let's start with Bryan Abreu. This is a guy who's been around. He's been good for a few years now. Third highest reliever WAR in baseball, 2.1 WAR. These numbers are out of this world. It's about 42% whiff and 37% K rate. Fastball, average 97, really good slider. What do you see with Abreu?
Really good grip and rip, pitchability, reliever, big physical body. And it's there are guys who throw harder, but are not quite as effective. It feels like the Astros have a good sense of what works coming over the plate, and the understanding that it comes in different shapes and sizes, so we'll talk about a few of their other relievers here. But just pulling up the Savant profile, it's elite in the league in terms of K rate and whiff rate.
Yep.
Right. So that tells me, like, there's no better bat misser in the game than whatever Bryan Abreu does. Sometimes for some players, that means it's a dominant fastball and then a pretty good slider, or the profile leans in one direction or the other. But look at this usage, like 50% straight up even split between two pitch grip and rich, four seam and slider combination. And this totals out or nets out as the elite bat missing option in all of baseball right now. So big physical, four seam ride, power to the slider. This one is a more, I can't really sit here and say, like, oh, this is an elite level delivery. It's big physicality. It's big. It looks athletic enough. Can this big physical guy with good four seam and slider traits put it over the plate enough for that to play? And that's the Astros bet. We know that this at this velocity with this movement and this pitch profile, secondary movement profile, this can work at the big league level. And they just keep replicating that model with seemingly unheralded, underwhelming, or even Craig Kimbrell's having a little run here right now, which we can get to with the Astros. But they just know how to compile a bullpen right now in this moment. I think they have for a while. But it's not from all the places that I think there's a minor league Rule 5 pick in here with Brian King, Stephen Okert, who I have some, familiarity with. And these guys are performing like top 100 relievers in the game across the board. So and especially I like this little fan graphs. I tell you about this all the time. Like, this is what they are overall this year, and this is what they've been in the last 14 days. And Brian King, Craig Kimbrell, Enyo Dos Santos, AJ Bluebaugh, Jaden Murray, Logan Van Way, all of those guys in the last 2 weeks have been pitching like top 100 relievers. So they're getting contributions from the rest of that depth bullpen that is they're getting it from the closer too, obviously, with Brian Abreu, but they're getting it all throughout and at a time when they need it the most. I would say the last 14 days is when most teams need their bullpen the most of the entire year. You got into September. You've gone through the dog days of August. Your pitching you've got to be trying to scrap it together. You'll get some youthful injections with your expansion rosters, like the guys who you add, but those guys aren't always ready as rookies to be prominent features in a playoff push or a playoff run here. But like the Astros bullpen is doing everything you would hope they would do to keep you in a strong position. And what are they, 3.5 games up right now?
Yep.
And a couple of weeks ago, the Mariners looked like they were going to take off in terms of maybe like, jump frog them. Texas playing good baseball right now too. But I think this is built to stay. And then because of the strength of the pitching, but then also they just got Yordan Alvarez back, who I love. I can talk about Yordan Alvarez all day. This is he feels underrated to me in a sense, right? He feels like he's so dominant when he's on the field that I think he kind of gets a little bit lost in terms of the superstars of the game. I could be misreading that, but if you just go through his Baseball Savant pages since I don't know, we can go all the way back to 2019. It's elite across the board. He doesn't have a big enough sample size, and it's everything you could possibly want from a left-handed offensive force. This is like what you talk about when, okay, if I could pick a bat to build around, right, and you, independent of what he looked like, what he did, you just look at that production. It's like, okay, the borderline elite walk rate, doesn't strike out, 97th percentile in bat speed, big physical imposing dude. So there's a kind of a mental, he steps up and you feel like the ball's going to go 500 feet when he hits it. He's got that thing that Stanton and Judge have to a certain extent, but it's left-handed. It's a sweet swing, and he's not going to chase you out of the zone. A little higher chase in 24, but he's going to get on base. He's going to hunt. To me, it's a really swing decision-driven offensive profile, and he's just a bat. He does not it's not a total player in terms of defensive contribution, but the offensive production is such that you could anchor your whole lineup, and they're getting him back at the right time for the Astros as they've benefited from some other beneficial additions, which we can talk about.
Well, it's just amazing when you compare him to like an Ohtani or you compare him to a Judge. I mean, the truly elite of the elite power hitters, those guys are bottom 5% in whiff rate. I mean, they're maybe a little bit more selective than Alvarez, probably just because he can hit everything, that he doesn't need to be as selective as they are. And
he covers everything. So whatever he swings at, he's putting barrel to. So it's kind of hard to knock him for that. He nets out at elite contribution. I think he's at the level, pure hit tool and pure offensive contributions, as like if you can group the best guys into one elite bucket, I think he definitely fits in that bucket across the board. I think, him, Ohtani, Judge, I don't know, Freeman has always and will always be in that category. Harper, like those, there's a grouping right now, and I'm sure I'm sliding somebody right now, but he belongs in whatever that top group of hit tool overall is, because he's just, he's a beast. Traded for a reliever on a playoff run.
For a combination of just pure hit tool and pure power, no, just bat the ball and then also the ability to hit it so hard.
Yep.
Who else that we know as overall hitters, Judge and Ohtani are obviously in that class, if not ahead of it, but just in that aspect, the combination of putting the bat on the ball whenever he wants and hitting it hard. Who else would you put in that category with Alvarez in the league right now?
I don't know if the data supports this, but my instinctual answer wants to be Freddie Freeman, maybe with less raw power. I think this guy's got even more raw power. But you're talking about left-handed guys. And Cal Raleigh might make some arguments here in terms of raw power from the left-handed side as well. But he being a switch hitter, he's in a different category, I guess. But those are the two names that really jump out in terms of, You watch the right Soto swing, and it's going to look like that. You watch the right Bryce Harper swing, it's going to look like top of the scale power. Shit, you even watch like Jazz sometimes, in a different frame. Some of those swings, that ball, that's top of the scale raw power.
Yeah, but then you look at Bryce Harper's whiff rate, which again, same as Judge, same as Ohtani. You're talking about 10%, 11% or below. And you look at Alvarez, and it is bright red.
Yep.
It's that combination. It's just maybe Miguel Cabrera back in the day was somebody who probably combined those two things, but that's a pretty unique combo. We look at these all the time doing the show every week, and that's an intrigue. Yeah, that's a good one. You usually don't see those two reds together.
No,
at like the way they are. So pretty unique player, obviously Cuban player. Proud to see him doing what he does. One thing as we go through this list, Adrian, and we do the Astros, and I just look at the names on the paper, a lot of postseason experience, which is to be expected given this organization's history. But they've had turnover. They've lost, obviously, critical pieces to Cubs, the Red Sox. We know the names. But then you look at the guys that they still have. The reliever. I mean, Abreu's pitched a ton in the playoffs. Kimbrel, obviously towards the tail end of his career, but he's got a ton of experience. Even a guy like Jeremy Pena, he did not waste time becoming that sort of playoff performer. So focusing on him for a second, I think he's an interesting guy because we tend to glorify the flashy shortstop who just looks cool, makes a lot of plays, can hit, can run, can play defense, can step up in big spots. I mean, Jeremy Pena, to me, for the level of star he is, which I don't think is that well known outside of baseball or even to the casual baseball fan, but you look at the ingredients, he's been a playoff performer, obviously, kind of day one. He plays great defense. He can run. He can hit. I think he went to school in America. His English is probably on the higher end of any Dominican player. I'm surprised he's not a bigger star.
I think it's some of what we talked about with Yordan Alvarez. There's something about I don't want to say being hidden in a market, a mid-major market, but there's so many stars stacked with the premier Dodgers, Yankees, like they're stacked with stars as well. And I think it's been a progression into this level of total contribution for Jeremy Pena, right? But he's another one that looks right, man, and that I can understand how he goes in the third round, right? Like in terms of you look at him as an amateur, and some of the things he does don't maybe fall into the square of how you want it to look like at the shortstop position, I guess. But I'm so open to anything, like all sorts of different body types and stuff. Correa, for example, was contributed at this position from what was thought to be that body type that isn't going to, it's going to grow out of that. Xander Bogaerts, there's a lot of bigger shortstops. So I'm now more open to what that should look like, but more of like the twitchy explosive than the like super slick fielding smooth. But in that twitch and explosion is a 97th percentile sprint speed, total 93 percentile in range as a shortstop. That to me is, I don't know, that shows some like crazy lateral athleticism, given how many good athletes are playing that position, that he is in that elite category for tools. And then you look at the base running value, like he's stacking up, and now the bat has come along on a consistent enough basis where he's putting more balls in play that are falling for hits as well. But that's because he's just putting a lot of balls hit hard at good angles. And look at that squared up percentage. A lot of those other bars are in blue, but he's hitting a lot of balls hard. And if you make good enough decisions on enough balls, you net out strong offensive production. So to me, he's a well above average hitter, elite base runner, borderline elite defender for a team that needs it right now. So, it wouldn't be like this is an engine of their club, just like Yordan Alvarez is, but on the other side of the ball. They're not across the board. They have some good defenders, but they're not a total elite defensive team. And I think he anchors them in a way that, again, this deep into the season, nobody's fooling you into the quality of the team that they are. You are who you are by far at this point. There's no more acquisitions to be made. And he's held an AL leading team at the cornerstone position for the duration of the year. And you don't look to upgrade from this. Actually, you're acquiring Carlos Correa, which I think is a good acquisition for them, going to the playoff experience kick that we were on before. We can get to that. But even on the lineup with Carlos Correa in it, Jeremy Pena is the shortstop, and understandably so. And having he's a cornerstone player for the Houston Astros for a long time. And I think we have a chance to see like MVP vote level seasons from Jeremy Pena. And with all those tools, that's a lot of value being stacked up.
Yeah.
And it looks right physically, man. He's like a big, strong, explosive dude like this. When he puts a ball in the seats, you're like, yeah, I could see that happening 35, 40 times in a season without the limitation. Now he's got to back it up with the hit tool to do that. But that's where I think you can look to batting average a little bit, you know, and as sometimes I can get too on the side of being negative about batting average, but I think him hitting 304 basically means 30% of the balls that he squares up are falling for an outcome that your team needs, a non-out, usually like for a good amount of time for extra base hits. So however he's netting that out, batting average is also rewarding him in this era where you can have, I don't know, you look at Cal Raleigh, you look at Cal Schwarber, you know they're stacking up offensive value, but you know it's not coming from the batting average. I think in this case, you can make the case that it's explaining why Jeremy Pena has been as good of a player for the Astros.
Want to recognize the chat real quick. We got our guy Yasser Martinez saying greetings from Tenerife, mi gente.
Wow. Isleño.
From the real East Las Canarias, not the one in Tamiami.
That is awesome. I actually have family there.
That's where my family's from, the Watches.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
That's great.
It's a very Cuban.
Good shout out.
It's a very Cuban connection.
Saludos.
East Las Canarias to Cuba.
Yeah.
So shout out to Yasser. El Perez, my guy, Best Baseball Podcast. Appreciate your comments. Just finishing up this infield real quick. I know we're spending a lot of time in the Astros, but they're a very intriguing team.
Yeah.
Mentioned Carlos Correa. That's going to be really interesting to watch, see him back where he belongs.
Yep.
Guy should have gone to the University of Miami. I'm still bitter about that one.
He was never going to the University of Miami.
Yeah, it would have as much shot as A-Rod, but it was cool to dream on for a second.
Yeah.
Mauricio Dubon, there.
Doobie.
You're talking about the defensive ability, the infield, the ability to hold it together for Pena. I think, you look at Dubon with all his versatility and what he can do. He held it together. Even more so just on the defensive side of the ball. Former soccer player. When we go to Marlins Park, or I guess Lone Depot Park, we call it now, thanks to our guy Oxfeld. You leave the park, nothing but Honduran restaurants, right? They're all over the place.
It's a good pocket for that.
Nice cataracho. They call baleadas. I get some of those, but not a baseball hub.
No.
I always have to turn the game on when I go there because they're either watching boxing or soccer or something else. So a guy like this to come out of Honduras, 26th round pick, went to high school in Northern California. I know you have experience with this player from when you were an intern with the Red Sox. Yeah. First World Series run, your World Series intern run. Tell me about this guy because this is a very unusual package here.
Yeah, one of my favorite total stories in all of baseball, just because of all the factors that you talked about, just the adversity on its own and the improbability of a Honduran-born player, then playing and showcasing in Northern California to then get selected as a high school player. That guy usually goes to college, but it lined up 26 round pick that's turned into, in a previous era, there were 26 rounds. In today's day, this is an undrafted situation because there's not 26 rounds anymore. So good scouting job on the part of the Red Sox in that draft to net out a very good big leaguer from that portion of the draft. And then you layer in the geographical complications because, my forward face to Mauricio was I was the GCL intern for the Boston Red Sox. And that means I was at JetBlue in Fort Myers for assistance with the player, the first level of professional baseball, the Gulf Coast League. And it was Fort Myers, Florida. And Mauricio Dubon was in that recently drafted class. And I remember him well. I used to, good anecdote. I walked into a gym not too long, a couple of years ago, and I hear somebody scream out, mil money. And I look over and it's Mauricio Dubon in the cage yelling at me saying, Adrian, mil money. And that's what the players would yell to me. Like, hey, when are we getting the meal money this week? And it was the Latin players, right? Mauricio being one of those Latin players. But years later, he would yell that at me and I would connect with it. So our stories go way back to that point. And Mauricio Dubon, while a drafted and prioritized player, didn't come in even in that draft class as like, okay, here's one of the guys who's going to get fast tracked. Like everybody was going to get evaluated evenly, but he was kind of roster depth at that point. But he just did he looked right always. He had good actions, good quick swing. always like when he played in a game, he impacted that game, wasn't overmatched when you put him in the game kind of thing. But at the GCL levels, it's not jumping out as like, okay, this nets out as a big leaguer right now. But here I am looking at him as like a full grown man now, whereas before he was more of a young, like a skinny, border kid, right?
Yep.
I think he would describe it as that. But always did a lot of really good fundamental things, defended well, put bat on ball, and had a swing that looked like it could leverage the ball, not just like a ground ball, like a ability to make contact on a lot of pitches at the right angles and have defensive versatility. Because he's not going to be the guy that, okay, you get drafted in the 26th round, you come into a system, here's shortstop and all the lion's share of innings at shortstop. No, even if you're a shortstop, you're going to get time at second, you're going to get time at third. And I think all of that benefited what he is now, which is, I put it in the script, right? Like his distribution of games played this year is kind of crazy. Sorry.
Yeah, so we got outfield for 56 games, just generally. You got left field specifically 42, second base 42, shortstop 27, third base 24, center field 15, first base 4, right field 3. I'm surprised he hasn't pitched in blowouts like Javi Sanoja for us on the Marlins. But yeah, that's pretty amazing.
That's incredible.
He's making an impact at those positions as well.
That's incredible, man. Yeah. There are a handful of guys that can do, like we talk about Kike Hernandez sometimes, and we give him a lot of due credit because he's done it for some, real teams and real runs, and it has been very impactful. But to me, I'm staring at another guy who's bailing out the Houston Astros at every turn on any given day. When Pena needs a day, or when like you can't run all your guys into the ground all at once. So having the versatility, and not only like you can have positional versatility and be just an okay defender everywhere you are. Mauricio Dubon goes there and he can be an impact defender in center, at second. He is an elite defender, elite range, 99th percentile in range as a second baseman. And I would bet when you put him at short and put him at third, you net out at pretty elite range as well. So, and then you go out to center. Sometimes you're late in the game, defensive alignment can be aided. I remember Miguel Rojas used to provide a lot of options for Don Mattingly because he could really play first in like a shutdown defensive scenario. And there were other guys on that roster that could also play good shortstop defense in that run. So you net it out as a total better defense with Miguel Rojas at first because all your defenders were now good and elite defensive first base. This is the profile that feels like he'd be good defensively anywhere you put him, and the flexibility that gives a manager. And I think Joe Spada deserves a lot of credit here too. He's going to navigate this whole thing that happened with Framber Valdez like last week. Like now that being thrown into a late postseason run, you're going to really show who you are and being able to corral that clubhouse and stuff. And I think he's done a really nice job to this point to get a team that, again, you read it on paper and it doesn't square that it's in some of these other considerations, but it is, and in large part because of guys like Mauricio Dubon, who I think Mauricio Dubon is making himself a good amount of money, in terms of like showcasing who he is. This skill set can be used and leveraged in any winning roster, and I think that bodes well. 98th percentile on total fielding run value, and doesn't strike out, doesn't whiff, and doesn't strike out. So putting a lot of balls in play and providing elite defense. It's kind of like Miguel Rojas did this for a while, and provided elite defense with elite contact ability. Just like don't punch, and it's having a really nice season in terms of total contribution to this club. So it doesn't surprise me why the Astros are good because of players like this. Yeah,
I mean, I mentioned Sanoja because I'm a Marlins fan. If you're trying to find a model for that kind of player, not a bad model right there. A lot different body type, bigger. But I can see a similar career path if it goes ideal for a guy like Sanoja, because this is certainly a model he wants to follow.
I got to get Mauricio on the show. I think he's also one of the things I didn't mention in the Gulf Coast League interaction was that Mauricio Dubon was also incredibly impactful in a lot of other players because he was bilingual.
You anticipated my question. So I want you to get on this. This is literally what I was about to ask you, which is he went to school here. He's from Honduras. Yes. Jeremy Pena, same thing.
Yep.
Right. How valuable, and you can speak about this particular example, but in general, because I wanted to get to this topic and I thought this was a perfect opportunity, especially like we just talked about the Valdez thing going on and having to navigate some stuff at the major league level. How valuable is the either American-born Hispanic player or the Hispanic player who moves to America at an early enough age to be truly bilingual?
I'm biased, but true bilingualism in baseball in particular, because it's such a Latin heavy sport. I don't know that this applies cleanly in other sports, but I think just being able to speak somebody's language, it's just, there's a human relatability factor there, especially when you're a coach, especially when you have to connect. You have to get these kids to understand concepts beyond just simple 1+1. And like, there are things that you're holding there in the middle of a major league game that in order to synthesize those things into understandable concepts, your language needs to be spoken. That's why the role of the interpreter has always been around in baseball. For that interpreter basically to be a teammate of yours that's there for a mound visit. The mound visit is where it shows up, in my opinion, the most, but it's not the only place it shows up. It's always the guy, the mound visit when it's an American coach talking to a Latin American born reliever. And in my case, I've known, I was like, okay, the English isn't the strength here, but Spanish isn't the strength on the other side. So English is being spoken to a Spanish dominant speaking player. And in the middle of the game, mouth covered, like you're trying to be, concise, but you're also trying to get a pitcher to navigate out of a hole. And there in comes the shortstop next to her, Kike Hernandez, Miguel Rojas. Like, you've watched a lot. I can put a lot of guys in there. That delivery of whatever message to that pitcher, for example, or hitter could also apply, but it could be the difference between, losing your composure and understanding what's going on, finding your pocket again, finding your confidence. So those guys, they really do a service there in real time for that player. And also advanced meetings, just general relatability things, the guy that can ask this coach, hey, I want to talk to the manager today. And you're a 17-year-old, recently arrived Dominican player, and you have another Latin American player that speaks Spanish that can help you communicate a message to whoever. Somebody ordering, like you're ordering food somewhere, you're, looking to pay your taxes, looking to do all sorts of things. The person who's like, especially the Americanization stuff, there's big cultural gaps between Dominican Republic, Venezuela, and the U.S. So somebody who's Latin
Cuba,
American,
like Alvarez,
100%. But there's an Americanization component that there's also like that cultural assimilation, and those guys going to school and high school here. I don't think it's necessary in order for that impact to be made, but I think it helped them. And I haven't been around Mauricio in a long time, but I'll bet he's helped a ton of players by just being that bridge guy that can help bridge the two cultures. And that's mostly by being bilingual. And I'm partial to it, but I also watched it be super effective. Guys like Sean Rodriguez, guys like Devin Marrero, guys like Eddie Alvarez, Nick Martinez. These guys, like, they can, hey, you understood that, right? Or like, sometimes players, there's a lot of pride involved, so they don't want to say no, they didn't understand something. So to have somebody where you can be like, hey, did you understand? Or this is what he said. Like, yeah. To have somebody validate that for you, I think it's a huge role in a lot of Latin American players' lives. And I think helps you be a glue guy and a vessel of communication to other players, even from staff to other players. So to me, it's only a positive, and I think it is for him.
It's amazing, before we wrap up in the Astros, a team that lost so much, right? I mean, you're talking about two of the best players in baseball walking out the door, guys who have been part of some of the best teams in franchise history. They're still, you look at them going into the playoffs, if they hold on. I mean, you have a elite hitter. You said top 3 hitter. I wouldn't push back on that at all. Someone you've been around. You have a ton of experience up and down, whether position player, on the mound, pen, starter. You got guys that have been around the block and been playing at the highest levels. And you got a nice bit of youthful energy as well. Correa brings a different look. I could see this being a team that, once again, just in the playoffs, takes it to a whole nother level, and that place is rocking. Yeah,
and I think there's one guy that I want to mention because he jumps out is Jesus Sanchez. I watched almost the entire arc of his really more AAA and Major League story, not since the beginning, but I have a good feeling about Jesus Sanchez in this lineup because I feel like he is a player that you should give that ability, that elite level bat speed, which I think he holds right now. That's always looked right to me at the plate. It's interesting that he was their trade deadline acquisition on the offensive side, pretty much, unless I'm missing somebody else. Oh, Carlos Correa, obviously. But I like this as a reestablishment location for Jesus Sanchez because from a scout standpoint, he's always been super attractive to me, man. This in the box, it just like when it clicks, that ball goes, it looks right. And he's got one of the better smiles in baseball. He's just like, and he's tooled up too. He's 83rd percentile arm strength. Like this is a good player that I think could put himself into a different category of consideration with a good postseason run with make himself a lot of money if he's good for them down the stretch here. But I'd like to see him get a shot.
Yeah, always been kind of confounding player in that you look at the home run totals, never exceeded 20 home runs.
Yep.
But the home runs he hits,
yes,
I think he has a 500-footer darn near, high 400s. He's hit a couple that are on the high end of distance for whatever season that is. And he's made some nice plays in the field despite not being a consistent defender. So like the highs are very high with Jesus Sanchez. You just haven't seen the consistent power in games, although good. I mean,
it's swing decisions though. Jesus, and I think Jesus will tell you that the better decisions he makes, there were a pocket of guys that I watched go through the major league bumps and bruises, and the biggest correlating factor is, okay, what kind of decisions are you making when you swing, and then what's happening when you swing? If you're consistently fouling off a 2-0 pitch middle, you're not going to be put into good situations. Or if you're going to be chasing out of the zone, before 2 strikes, you're going to put yourself in a lot of those situations. I think I've just seen the direct correlation always between Jesus Sanchez being really impactful and able to take over a series when he's hot, right? There are not that many guys who could do things like that. And he's capable of that, but the swing decisions haven't allowed him, hopefully in a lineup that's deeper with guys that make really good swing decisions. There's some osmosis benefit and some philosophical, sometimes change of scenery is good. How are these guys looking at hitting? There's good hitters in this lineup. How do they approach hitting philosophically? That's maybe a better fit with what I needed in this moment. Even if the guys I've worked with in the past were good too. There's something about a new scenario and all of a sudden bad team for a long time, you get thrown on a good team. It's like, oh, this is what this is.
Yep.
But I've seen him do some freaky stuff on a baseball field power wise.
I hate to say the example because they're both kind of going against the Marlins here, but Jazz Chisholm, he showed more at the Marlins, but somebody who took it to a whole nother level in a different environment always
Can
had
we talk about him
tools.
for a second?
Let's talk about it.
I think that's a really, it wasn't on the script, that we put together today, but he's netting out as what? The second best second baseman in all of baseball, maybe the best one in the AL, right? Like, Ketel Marte has stacked up a lot of WAR, but if you're a Yankee fan right now, he's probably going to get have a 30-30 season, but at an 820 OPS, 820 plus OPS, playing 82nd percentile in range coverage, getting on base a lot. That walk rate, again, to me, Jazz, you can make a swing decision argument here, but Jazz always had an innate understanding of the strike zone. I think that's why he gets fired up when balls are called outside of the strike zone, but I actually think he sees the zone pretty good. And I think there's a pairing there that I know that I watched happen between Jazz Chisholm and James Rowson that I watched in Miami, and I felt like they were on their way to a lot of really good work and things. So I'll bet when he gets traded to the Yankees and that's the receiving offensive coach coordinator, I'm seeing a correlation there in terms of like Jazz building on where he was already going. But now again, you go from a bad team to an elite team and a market that's like on you as you like this is what it works in the other direction for Anthony Volpe right now, where like it's kind of turned on him a little bit, and that market can do that to you, right? I watched Boston do it to Pablo Sandoval, for example. Like Gary
Sanchez.
It can go south. Gleyber Torres do through certain stretches, but for now, for this pocket, he's really thriving there and putting himself in a really good position to make a lot of money for himself too. Like, having your better developmental seasons and pushes happen for the Yankees as you near your free agency window. And the way he's doing it is projectable. It's sustainable. It's good swing decisions. It's good defense at a premium up the middle position with versatility to play third if you need to. But some of these, talk about top of the scale power in some of these situations, like 5 or 6 foot, like 170 pounds. This to me, he's the ultimate combination of strength and elasticity. It's really, it's a really pliable kind of overall body explosion, but he also has that quick twitch. And then if you've ever shaken his hand, like there's some guys where you just shake their hand and you're like, okay, that's Starling Marte. You shake Starling Marte's hand, and you're like RoboCop. I should call him RoboCop. But Jazz has some of that too, where it's like, don't let any of the frame fool you. There's a lot of strength in that total athletic package. And he's also one of those guys that athletically, you can't really put a ceiling on anything for him to do that he can do. And that's why I think you see him scratch top of the scale raw power in a given moment, or top of the scale, not maybe top of the scale sprint speed, but like in the right 0 to 90, he'll net out at one of the better runners in the game too. And he's got that big play ability defensively as well, where I think he's capable of making a lot of just kind of unbelievable plays. He's not limited athletically in kind of any direction. And he's also, this is the first year we've seen this run of health.
Yep.
Like a big sample of Jazz Chisholm. A lot of that time where he was very good, he was just on the field more. So I think the more he's able to stay on the field health-wise, I think they're doing a really nice job with him. You're not seeing as many of the ticky-tack injuries or the things that kind of, pulled groins, things that get you out for a while. And it feels like is he the best second baseman in the American League right now?
I mean, when you talk about the whole package plus he's got energy too. I think that doesn't go obviously on the stat sheet, but he can energize you real quick with some of his base running.
He's got a magnetism to him.
Yeah. I mean, and it's the injury stuff. We know he's a competitor and he loves baseball and he pushes through, but I do wonder if being on a team like the Yankees, as opposed to a team like the Marlins that wasn't going anywhere and he was there, if he makes just sometimes you make business decisions like, they're not even trying to win these games. Yep. Why am I going to play the way I play and put my body on the line that way? I'm not accusing him of anything. I'm just saying I could see myself looking at it that way sometimes when it's that time of the year, as opposed to the Yankees where
it's a harder pitch to a manager.
They need him.
Is what I'll say. When you have to make it to a manager and another, so I don't think he ever necessarily makes that calculation, but I do think there's something to some of the injuries are laying out for a ball, playing center field where you crash into the fence, or you kick your toe. I remember he kicked the bottom of the fence one time and he was out for a little while then. So a lot of the things you need to see guys pushing it to the level of playing hard, but there is some sort of, I think there rightly is some deducing on the part of that athlete to maybe like, okay, this has gotten me injured in the past before. I can't just like keep doing that exact thing. So playing at a somewhat cautious level. And then as like September postseason, then the only way to do that is to ramp it up all the way for when the postseason comes around. And I think he's the type of player that does that. I mean, the Yankees got to the World Series with him as their third baseman down the stretch. And now they're doing what they're doing now in large part because he's been a fixed piece for them, providing a lot of value in big situations. So I'm biased because I've been a little close to this one, but it's good to see what you thought were top of the scale tools and baseball ability actually playing more often at the top of the scale at the biggest stage. So that's and it's just a pretty swing, man. There's not that many swings that you could put in this visually aesthetic territory. It's generational in that sense. Like, there are other guys. Griffey Jr. is the top of the scale, but guys like Cano and Carlos Gonzalez, there's something about guys with like really pretty left-handed swings that hit for power as well.
Yeah.
Those guys get famous. Roman Anthony right now, to me, is a really interesting one. It's unfortunate that he got hurt here, and that's going to hurt them. But there's just something really pleasing about like a sweet left-handed swing that hits the ball for power, and I think that's what the kids like. So I watched Jazz be a lot of kids' favorite player here, and it's simpler for a lot of them, especially of this era, of this generation. There's something that, and I think it's connected to that. He's charismatic as well, but I think the sweet swinging left-handed homers, it's the highlight that plays, and it's like the way I used to look at Ken Griffey Jr. for an example. Yep. Like it was just like damn, without that sweet swing, is he as cool as he is, kind of thing? And
Right.
there's some of that here.
And the ease to it, just the kind of athletic arrogance to it.
Right.
I remember his grand slams on that last Marlins playoff run were huge moments for recent history of the franchise. I've been going to what is now Lone Depot Park since 2012, since it opened. And we've seen Stanton's prime, really, Giancarlo Stanton's prime there. We've seen some major home run hitters at that park, obviously visiting guys, Bryce Harper, a ton of guys, Acuna. But his highest and hardest home runs, to me, even though I know distance-wise they're not the furthest, they just look the furthest in person because of how they kind of sky up and the follow-through. And when he goes upper deck at Lone Depot, it just looks higher and further.
He went left on left against Ryan Yarbrough here at Lone Depot against the Dodgers. And it's to this day the furthest ball I've seen hit in a game. And it was one of those that hit the upper part of the upper deck.
Yep.
And it was like just one of those baseball feats that you'll always remember because you feel like, I don't know that I'll ever see. And he did it left on left. And that year he was really struggling left on left. It was a thing that came up a lot. So that he's done some of the top of the scale things. He's able to reach athletic ability at the top of the scale. And I've watched, there were some plays, there was a ball, he was playing shortstop. We were playing Tampa and he just kind of that dead man's area, shortstop, full layout, full extension into no man's land.
Yeah.
Center fielder's not going to get to it.
Yeah.
And to glove that baseball in that moment, in that year, like the whole season was on the line every game. And so I've seen glimpses of that. And then I'm also partial because he and I have done a few sneaker cleat collaborations that have, we've done 4 volumes of a major league collaboration where I design a shoe and he'll wear it. So yeah, I'm biased there, but shout out to athletes and people being open to put other people, other creatives onto, I don't know, into play, into rotation, into give them a canvas, give them a platform. And he has and did for me. So it lines up that it's also that I have the history and it's cool to see him having a moment.
Sticking in his old division here with the NL East, I want to talk about a trio of young arms for the Mets. Sounds familiar. We heard that before. Shoot, how long was that? 10 years ago? It might have been longer than that when some of those guys like Syndergaard, DeGrom, Wheeler were coming up. Harvey. That was an era.
It was.
Turns out that this era might be even better with the whole package, with the owner, with everything they got going on at the same time. But let's start with Nolan McLean. 6'4", 215. They call him Cowboy Ohtani, Oklahoma State Cowboy, 24 years old, North Carolina born. Very interesting. There's 2 guys on this list that were double draftees for the Mets, but starting with the McLean story, probably the more traditional story where he got drafted by another team, in this case, the Orioles, 3rd round, goes back, gets drafted by the Mets the next year. 2-way guy, even played 2-way for a little bit in the minors. I watched some of his stuff at the plate. I mean, extremely powerful. Just the body looks strong. He swings hard. He's a very physical player, which I know is a theme with some of these guys, something you always talk about. But just watching him play DH was impressive. And now see him as a pitcher. 6 pitches, fastball, sweeper, curve, cutter, splitter. The changeups he was throwing at the major league level kind of caught my attention. There you see a nice fastball. But he's got an arsenal, man. And he just, let's say, looks right. I think this guy definitely fits that category.
Looks right. And the double draft is really interesting. So the Mets, that to me tells me that scouting department has been chasing him and his profile for a while now, so that it's good. Okay. Maybe you took a flyer on a guy as a draftee out of high school. He went on to go play at college, would go on to get selected again. So something interesting happening there. And then to have hey, we should have benefited from already liking this guy from our previous process to then maybe let's make sure this one doesn't get past us, in the 3rd round is the 91st overall pick in 2023. So to me, really good total netting out of a potential top of the rotation starter, at least mid rotation starters, what it looks like to me. And then with a name like Cowboy Ohtani, that's I wonder if that one will stick, but I think he's going to consistently be a pitcher from here on out. And I had an up-close view of Nick Martinez. We've talked about him a lot on the show. And I just had an up-close view of watching a really good athlete who was a 2-way guy through most of his collegiate career, then be able to focus on pitching. And I've seen that Peyton Tole, we just talked about last
Yep.
episode. I've seen when players are able to focus in on that full time and get the reps to do that, there's a big increase that could happen. That's like, oh, well, I didn't see that at draft time, but now here you are with top of the scale stuff, right? Because you do a redraft, he's getting taken very early in whatever we redraft. And I also think that this is one of those where I wonder how much is true scouting and how much is true analytics. Hopefully it's the bolstering of the both, because it's 3,000 RPM breaking ball and upshoot 4-seam fastball. We talked about it with Hunter Brown. We can talk about it here. And the separator, and the reason he reminds me of Nick Martinez, because you mentioned the changeup, right? Like that to me, that to me is the separator, between a starter and a reliever, the ability to develop the changeup. And if you're a two-way guy, more than likely, you're probably like coming in relief a lot. When you're in relief, you're going more fastball slider, like 2-pitch mix as a reliever. As a starter, you don't get the chance to develop the whole arsenal. And that's where I like kind of connected to Nick Martinez, because he was always able to have the changeup as the out pitch. He was able to stay on the right side of any matchup, any split. So if that's come along in addition to like a power slider and a good 4-seam fastball, that's starting pitcher impact right here. You know, like that's where it can really come together. And I think that's what we're seeing. And big physical athlete with repeatable delivery. It's probably what gets him to I can't seem to.
Well, while you're working that, I mean, the thing that caught my attention with a guy like this, and I only mention it because they say Cowboy Ohtani. Obviously, Ohtani is a legitimate two-way all-star player in the major league level that no one even on that planet. But one thing that I always thought was interesting about Ohtani is that you would think a two-way player would be more limited in his pitch mix, because there's only so many hours in a day. You got to worry about being a hitter. Then you got to worry about having a pitch mix. Maybe you keep it simple, but Ohtani throws up to 7 pitchers. Yeah. You look at McLean, fastball, sweeper, curveball, changeup, cutter, splitter. So even though he was, I guess, having more limited reps, and you see it right there, look at that chart. I mean, he's throwing everything.
Yep.
So even though he was limited in his reps as a pitcher throughout his career until recently, he still developed a pretty wide repertoire.
Yeah. And to me, I don't know what he does or what he did in the off season, right? I'm sure in order to throw this many pitches with this much pitchability and actually be able to use them, your off season needs to look a certain way. It's hard enough to get command 2 pitches right. So to have full usage of your arsenal, to me, there's a real pitchability here, but also I would connect that to what I bet would be like a pretty aggressive, intense off season plan. Again, I'm going to connect it to personal in terms of like Nick Martinez. Like, I see what that entails. Like for you to be trying new grips with a changeup or a sweeper or a sinker and a 4-seamer, like that, all that work happens in the off season as a starting pitcher. So I'm like, it's the only way you can get there. And you got to throw enough strikes with everything to prove that those are pitches you can throw. He seems like a true any pitch, any count kind of guy with good underlying data and high powered like RPMs to the breaking ball. And then you look at the slide of the sweeper and it's like, and that's big, powerful. It shouldn't look this polished for a two-way guy, but maybe the better pitcher was always just kind of being suppressed a little bit by how much time you have to spend hitting.
Wasn't Nick Martinez a two-way guy at some point? Did that stop when he got to college, or was he able to go both in college?
He was a position player into college who had a good arm and it was a really good athlete. And the team wasn't like some elite level team. So he made sense in a lot of 7th inning, 8th inning, even closer eventually. But he would play second most of the game and come in and close. But he was a position player that then made the transition because of really strong characteristics as a pitcher when he did it. But sometimes you don't get the chance to show it, right? Like in a college program, we talked about this with Peyton Tole. If you're a good bat in a lineup and you also pitch, your team needs you to hit and provide offense as well. So, but I think he made the right choice here. I think he's going to be doing this in particular for a long time.
No, I think so. And we talk a lot about physicality. We still have more of that to go because we get to the Marlins where it's really kind of front and center, but a different type of profile here. with Jonah Tong. 6'1", 180,
Yep.
22 years old. Yeah, I kind of previewed at the top of the show that we'd be talking about cold weather pitchers, right?
Yep.
North-south. We mentioned that with Hunter Brown from Michigan. North-south pitcher. Jonah Tong from Ontario, Canada, obviously not that far from Michigan. 6'1", 180. I'm not sure he's even that. The Tim Lincecum comparison, I mean, you mentioned it, and seeing how they finish, not just their size, but look at the leg kind of kicking up in the air where it's almost horizontal, or it's almost vertical. Pretty cool visual there, just knowing how good Tim Lincecum was in his prime. But fastball rises 97, mid-70s curve, over the top release, 20 inches plus of induced vertical break on that four-seam fastball. Led the minors with 179 Ks. Again, we mentioned native Canadian, went to Georgia as a senior, 7th round pick, but has really developed. Unusual profile. We were talking about the Vulcan change before the show. That's something he employs as well. So what do you see with this guy?
First, I see the Mets are scary because they have money and they have good process now. And I think they've had pockets where they've had good process as well. They've been developing good players for a while, but to see 3 amateur scouting graduations into your major league lineup on the
0
heels,
first-round picks,
right? On the heels of, they have other story, Alonso, Vientos. Like, this is an extended story, but right now, I'm seeing the Mets do a lot of things in terms of the player development and player showing up to the big leagues and being good is very difficult as a player development system. It's not the norm for guys to show up and just be very good when they arrive here. And I think that they've done a nice job in terms of, like, these guys get there and they look like they're big leaguers and they're performing. And I think that at least on the pitching front, this is what developing young starting pitchers with upside is what you want. I'm going to stop short in terms of, like, Lincecum was a generational kind of once in a generation pitcher, multiple Cy Young winner. So he needs to do a lot before I can give him that. I can see just the finish. And he had a cleaner delivery. There's Jonah Tong's delivery it's a good, solid delivery, but Tim Lincecum had like a generational, it was studied in terms of, like, the length of his stride and the deception, and Lincecum to me is in his own pitching category.
It's about foot staring in the sky kind of thing. That's the finish of it with the legs. That's the one thing that I don't know, kind of brings it up a little bit.
And there's a little bit of like a dunk or a head whack toward the end. So it's a little non-traditional. I don't know. Sometimes that adds to the deception of it. But what's clear is that the Mets chase high riding four-seam fastballs in the draft or in their development system. So they've been pretty effective in developing that, and also, like, hunting that clearly in the draft. Because here we just talked about 2 guys with vertical profiles to the fastball.
Another right-hander, different body type, 6'2", 210 righty, Brandon Sproat. Sprout or Sproat? Sproat
is how it was mentioned. I remember him being discussed in the draft rooms.
So out of Pensacola, Florida. This is a guy that, just watching him, I didn't really know anything about him, really, until he started doing stuff like this. As you see, Sal Stewart, another guy we'll talk about here in a second, but really, really hard thrower. He's got breaking ball with the slider. He's got a change up. Interesting story. So the Mets actually drafted him twice. He was a slot, but the Mets drafted him twice.
Okay.
So this was not another team drafting the player and the player didn't sign. The Mets drafted him as a second rounder in 2023. He was a third rounder the year before that they couldn't sign. So they stayed with him and got him again. Their persistence was rewarded here with the player. I don't know how that works with the rules. If you draft the same player twice, I guess it doesn't make a difference in terms of what you get back. But man, pretty electric. Of all these 3, does he have the most electric, just pure stuff?
This is the one, to me, if I evaluated all 3, still McLean is kind of hard to, what I know about him is a lot. It's too much, but this to me checks the box more as I like this delivery. A little bit of a longer arm swing. You can talk about that, but not problematic enough for you to, if you think Yuri Perez has a long arm swing, but I don't know, really, this is probably my favorite delivery of the 3. So if there's velocity and strike throwing ability there, and chances are he's probably got a good, he's more of a sinker, kind of 27% sinker, 13% four seam. So this is more of a getting under the barrel, but he's missing a lot of barrels so far in this small sample. Yeah, it's what you would want to have, 3 early 20s starting pitchers that all look the part, as you also have money to spend in free agency. So I think the Mets are here to stay for a while, at or near the top of this division. So the Phillies are good too. Braves aren't sleeping for a long time. Like that, I think this is an ice bath for the Braves this year. I think you'll see like them coming back with a vengeance. But Mets, and then shout out to David Stearns and the rest of his front office, right? Like they're, and you got to feel good in terms of the Brewers are very good too. And the Brewers, that's a David Stearns established system. So like the Brewers being in very good shape, and also the Mets being near the top of the division, the credit where credit is due. Like there's some good things happening in terms of processes. And if you look at Milwaukee, for example, Freddie Peralta is a 4-seam monster. Like there's just some philosophical things that I think you can connect. And I think the Mets can power that now with Juan Soto and Lindor.
Right. We talk about the money, right,
Yeah.
with Steve Cohen, but this right here, this is just old-fashioned,
Yeah,
like you
this
said, processes. These are good picks. None of these guys first-rounders. Not a single one first-rounders. You got basically a second-rounder in Sproat. You got a 7th-rounder in Tong, and then with McLean, a 3rd-rounder on a repeat. So that's good scouting.
You ask your amateur domestic to build a rotation for you. We just lost DeGrom. Like this is the assigned task. This is where they get interesting, because I think that they will continue to complement free agency wise always.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that catches up with very good internally grown players, now you're cooking. It's like what the Astros tested doing as well when they were spending top dollar on their extensions and stuff like that. But their grown internal player pool was also booming at that point. And I think that's when you have those two things going, they're absolutely necessary. That's the Dodgers have had pockets of doing this. So I see it as a Marlins adjacent person. Like the NL East is going to be tough for a really long time here.
So let's stay there. So we're going to talk about Sal Stewart, Miami guy. I want to table that just because there's a lot to get into there. A local guy, very interesting profile. I want to get to that one later. I'm betting on him continuing to hit because he's been hitting ever since I first heard his name. I don't think he's ever stopped hitting at any point. So we're betting on Sal Stewart continue to hit, because we'll talk about him on a future episode there for the Reds. But obviously a player that we're really excited about as a local guy. But keeping it NL East, keeping it Miami, my guys, the Miami Marlins. I have watched way too many box scores and Twitter clips of these players. I feel like I know them already. Of course, we don't really know we got until they are in the big leagues, but excited to talk about these guys. One of whom you were in the room when he was drafted, or at least adjacent to the room. You were in the room for Thomas White, I believe, right?
Yes, for Thomas White. A lot of the discussion and the lead up and yes, I remember Thomas White's draft scenario pretty well.
So Thomas White, the best left-handed pitcher in the minor leagues, the best left-handed prospect in the minor leagues. He is a whiff machine. Yep. I mean, there's some walks there, but just pulling up here, his most recent start, which was at the AAA level, he just moved up, had some walks, but 10 Ks in 4 2/3 innings, 16 whiffs, 94 pitches. And that's just consistent with what he's been doing the entire time he's been in the minor leagues, just a whiff machine. He will be, according to your projections, and I won't push back, pitching in the major leagues at 21 years old, big physical guy from Massachusetts. Where is he from? He's from the
Andover,
England,
Massachusetts.
Right? There you go.
Academy.
So he was projected as a high pick. I remember during the draft, when I first heard his name, it was closer to where Noble Meyer ended up going. Ends up being a compensatory pick selection, and the rest is history, man. He's one of the best around. What are you seeing from him, and what has he done that has maybe exceeded expectations?
He has, to me, this one was always pretty exciting. I think it's one of the better selections in terms of what he's eventually become, right? Or what he's the kind of value that he's established here in terms of prospect value and just overall, like, tell me the best left-handed pitching prospect in the game. You've netted out like a pretty good result as an amateur, like about as good a result as you can. And DJ Svilik and Gary Denbo and all those guys, they deserve a lot of credit in terms of like making this selection, right? When it was made, when it was in the comp Comp A round. You actually selected Noble Meyer as the primary pick, or as the pick ahead of him. But this is what I was looking for, the bonus slot value, because Thomas White would have been an over slot deal in terms of really strong. Like, hey, if it's not this number, I get to go to, I forget where he was committed at the time, but it would have been one of the elite programs in the nation. So straight face, credible, like I can go to school and, then be Cade Anderson maybe. Like maybe that's what Cade Anderson's story looked like, and it's just why he gets to LSU and all of that. But I see a lot of Thomas White and Cade Anderson as we were looking at the draft stuff, just long, loose left-handers with good profiles. But Thomas White it wasn't a slam dunk that's a guy that you could get because the number is going to be high. So you have to, the picks around the pick that you make in order to overpay for that have to be adjusted for. So it's either going to be overslot at the top, so you can get the overslot, or you're going to go underslot at the top to go overslot with your next pick. So there's some draft manipulation, not manipulation, but just like budget allocation, in order for you to be able to select a player of this caliber. That's why, to me, I credit that scouting department, because that's reaching to get a guy and making sure you get him, and to have it net out as a number 1 overall left-handed prospect in baseball. That's the scouting story. There's also a development story that's probably a little more of a recent front office, recent developmental staff, right? Although, that part would have been initiated by the previous one, but there's also been a good development process here to get him to be this successful very quickly and kind of fly through the minor leagues as a high school pitcher. And then the reason I feel he's major league ready, because he's stormed through, he's missed bats at every level. There's some strike throwing, question marks here in terms of, has he shown super consistent strikes throughout? As a major league starter, that threshold is just high. It's just very, very, very high. To keep a starting rotation spot, you have to throw a lot of strikes. So we'll see. But the ability to miss a bat at the professional level is clearly established. So the only bat to prove it against is the major league bat. Because, I think he had 6 walks the other night, but he had 10 punch outs. Huge whiff rate on the stuff.
Yep.
At the AAA level, as a recently, not too long ago, drafted player as a high school kid. So that development system also, in addition to Thomas, who deserves a lion's share, I think there's some good developmental things happening here to build an arsenal that could miss that many bats. But kudos to them. That's a good one. And building around young left-handed starting pitching is a good model in terms of long-term sustainability. So
there's going to be a lot of comps to Skubal, right? Just because of the size. I think they're pretty much identical size. Thomas White, they got him at 6. He's a little taller. So I guess you can maybe put him more closer to the Crochet size-wise. Right. I know these are lofty comparisons, but this guy's 6'5", 240, left-hander. Skubal a little shorter at 6'3", but 240 pounds. Crochet's closer to 6'5", right? Maybe an inch taller. Yeah. But big, heavy lefties with obviously incredible stuff. I'm looking at Skubal. It's hard to compare him to either guy because he came straight out of high school. Those guys were on a different trajectory, just age-wise. Maybe a little more control from those guys, certainly from Skubal, more in the 2 to 3 range in terms of walks per 9. Thomas White sitting in that 4.5 range most of his minor league career. So got to get that down. But as far as just the AA stats, had his first AAA start this week, but AA at Pensacola, 1.59 ERA, 10 starts. You were talking about 75 strikeouts, K through 9, about 15.
75 strikeouts in 45 innings as a 20-year-old in AA. That means you don't belong there. And we've talked about, once you establish that at AA, AAA, this is refining now. Can you get crafty hitters out? Can you get hitters? AAA is where the hitter now doesn't chase nearly as much as the more prospect laden AA.
Right.
So your ability to work around craftier hitters and not just talented ones, but you bust through the AA threshold, because 75 strikeouts in 45 innings at a 1.5 or 1.5 ERA, that's great and all. But the fact that you're missing that many bats at that level is okay. You don't belong there anymore. And then to explode onto AAA and in your first AAA outing, miss that many bats. He's also, I'd separate him from Skubal a little bit, not in terms of net outcome, Skubal's outcome is top of the scale. That's the best net outcome. But this one also is like, that delivery has always looked like, okay, you can take this with confidence, knowing like this is big, physical, left-handed with a really clean delivery. Injury is the only thing that could really kind of go wrong here. And he looks like that as a high school cold weather, Northeastern player. So this was one of the ones that I feel like I could comfortably say always felt like it looked right. It's easier to say this with how it's turned out. There's been plenty of guys that look right that don't get to this point, but it's clearly being buoyed by true swing and miss stuff.
Yeah, and then
it looks right.
It looks right. I mean, again, I'm not trying to put the lofty expectations on him of the two of the best pitchers in baseball, but it's just hard to ignore at least the size parallels and some of the ability to miss bats that he shares with those very successful players. Hopefully keep throwing strikes. You mentioned AAA is going to be tougher for him. His first start, even though he had 10 Ks in 4 2/3, he did walk a few guys. So we'll see if he can make that adjustment. Another left-hander's had a different path, Robbie Snelling. So this guy was the minor league pitcher of the year, I believe, in the entire minor leagues 2 years ago. Certainly the best pitcher at that time in the San Diego Padres organization. Has an off year last year. Gets traded for Tanner Scott at the deadline. We talked about off air. Trade that made sense for the Padres, given what they were trying to accomplish, getting past the Dodgers. Ultimately didn't work out. For the Marlins, you are ecstatic, trading an expiring rental reliever basically for an elite left-handed pitching prospect. And Snelling this year, the fastball's ticked up, the stuff's ticked up in general. He's throwing a ton of strikes, always has been a major strike thrower, former linebacker, super competitive. You see his size. I'm just pulling up the numbers here. Talking about Thomas White being 20, tearing through everything. Robbie Snelling's not that much older. If that, he's 20 right. He's 20 right now. Sorry, 21 right now. So he's really not that much older than Thomas White, and extremely, extremely effective. Looking at his numbers in Pensacola, 14 starts, ERA, a microscopic. This is in Pensacola, 3.61. In Jacksonville, AAA, a microscopic 1.37, and that's with 9 starts. So he's been doing it in AAA as well. K through 9, 11.4. Much more of a strike thrower than Thomas White, only 2.2 walks per 9. That's, like I said, the stuff's ticked up. There were some questions whether he just didn't have the pure swing and miss. He's been doing it with his fastball. He's been doing it with his off speed, his breaking ball. Impressed with this guy. What do you see from Robbie Snelling?
This is exactly the outcome that you, as the Padres, hope it isn't when you're trading him away. But that to me says more about how much they needed Tanner Scott when it happened. That's the same deal, right? It's the Tanner Scott deal.
Yeah, it's Tanner Scott deal.
So but Tanner Scott was an elite reliever in baseball at this moment. So it makes sense that it would have cost you something. So I think the Marlins, deserve credit for leveraging kind of that being the prospect you selected as your return for a elite level bullpen piece. And I think something jumped though, right? Something jumped between 2024 and 2025 here. Something happened this offseason. Something, the command really, he's always had decent command, but the command is really ticked up. And then the swing and miss component has really ticked up as well.
Yeah. So
maybe Marlins player development it deserves some credit here as well, right? Like in terms of this was a good prospect, but now it's taken a jump in a different organization.
Ryan Weathers, similar kind of pass, same correct. Organizational transition, lefty.
Yeah, it's a great comp. So they're picking good players over there with San Diego, and this is what I come down. You're not always going to get something for a low giveaway that you give. Sometimes to get good players, you need to have good players. You need to have developed good players. So I see it as not a knock at all on the Padres. Like, shout out to you guys for drafting and developing a guy that netted you what I remember Tanner Scott to be at that point, which is you're playing in the biggest of fish as it relates to relievers at that time. And then he would go on to sign a huge deal with the Dodgers in his free agency year. So to just it made sense why they went after that profile when they went for it. But that's the risk you play in the big leagues.
But so you look at it. So 16 starts. This is in San Antonio. So this is last year, same age as Thomas White, is now his age 20 season. He had just won the minor league pitcher of the year before. So 2023 minor league pitcher of the year, rocketing up the charts. Again, linebacker committed to LSU. So this guy was a football player, still a first round pick. Picked not that far. I think it was picked 39 or 40. White was 35
overall in 22.
Right. And White was 35 the next year. So similar range. But after being minor league pitcher of the year, San Antonio, AA for the Padres, 2-8, 16 stars. So a nice fat sample, 6.01 ERA. The command was a little down, going to 4.1 walks per 9. But look at the strikeouts dipping to 8.2. This year, you're getting closer to 11, mid 11s. So major difference, like we said, in the swing and miss and just the ability to put hitters away. Targeting guys that are a little dusty, right? Maybe this guy was the top prospect, had a bad year. Ryan Weathers, again, I come back to that comparison because it's the same hand, it's the same organizational transition from San Diego to the Marlins, but he was also a guy that at one point was a top prospect, Weathers, right? And when he was acquired by the Marlins, he was
top 10 draft selection, I believe, too.
Right. So when the Marlins got him, he was not that. Certainly for what they got him, much less than Tanner Scott.
Yep.
Snelling, you still had to give a significant amount.
It's a Garrett Cooper trade. That's a good
right. Now for the
good
Weathers
outcome,
was a steal, but the Snelling trade, you had to give up a lot with Scott being a high value player, but I don't think Snelling's value coming back was the same as it would have been the year before when he was minor league pitcher of the year, or it would have been now. So you got him at the lowest point of his value.
A little bit of a dip in the value after like a peak.
Is that something that front offices consciously do to say, hey, there might be an opportunity here with this player. We love this player. Yeah. We thought we wouldn't have a chance of getting this player last year, but he's healthy. He seems fine, but something's a little off. Maybe we can slide in, grab him now, put him on our system, and then we're going to get back to the player that we thought. Does that targeting happen with guys that are having bad years that makes them not more valuable, but certainly more attractive? Like, hey, let's go and get this guy.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes there's situations where you don't otherwise have, like, you have to take a shot somewhere. Like the obviously good players you're usually held on to really highly by their teams. So anytime that there's a dip in, I call it a little bit of, sometimes it happens via fatigue or that you have other guys stacked in a grouping above. So you have to deal from somewhere. And if you want to protect, like the Red Sox protected Roman Anthony, Marcelo Meyer, and Christian Campbell out of like most trade discussions. So you're trying to protect the tier. You have to deal from somewhere. And maybe he was in that, wasn't an elite category, has a down year. So that dip in value momentarily reminds me a lot of Jesus Luzardo, for example.
Yep.
Shouldn't have been available in that context, but your team is making the run. So it's the being under the gun in terms of like the trade deadline and needing to be good in a division with the Dodgers can make you do some things where you don't necessarily want to do. Right. But there's a give to get component. And I think in the Ryan Weathers scenario, it's that was an under the gun, like right at the end of the deadline kind of situation. And it's it feels at the end of the day, it becomes a human, like, I don't want to do this, but let's, and that feels like what Weathers would have been. And Snelling is different because Tanner Scott was was the dude. You knew you needed to step up because it's not free agency. You're competing with other competing offers. So if you want that pitcher, your offer has to be compelling. And kudos to them for drafting a guy 39th overall. They paid him $3 million when the slot value was $2 million. So it means, back to the Thomas White thing, it means you really wanted him to get him. So they got him and then flipped him into an elite, major league value for a short window. And that's why reliever trades can always burn you the most. But I don't know, Padres are still in a good, strong position as an organization. Would they be a little better with Robbie Snelling right now? Maybe. Does the prospect fatigue happen? Does change of scenery impact this whole new way of looking at pitching? Maybe. Not that San Diego would have been looking at it wrong, but just there's something about a new scenario that can really, things can get unlocked. They can also go the other direction sometimes, but if you have good processes, and I think Marlins are there, if not on their way to that, I think you're seeing some good things happen between like progression from AA, AAA into the big leagues. Into the big leagues part, we shall see. But they're getting guys to establish value.
Yeah, and the Padres, look, if they win the World Series and the Dodgers don't, no one cares about Robbie Snelling at that point. You're feeling pretty good about what you've done as an organization. But Also, Adam Mazur in that trade, Grant Pauly, two
Yep.
guys who I believe they were top 5 in their organization at the time, at least according to the external rankings. Two guys who have already made it to the major league level with the Marlins, had varying degrees of success. I think Pauly's got a chance. Mazur, strike thrower. Going to the other side with the righties to another country, which is the Dominican Summer League here. We have some outstanding pitchers to talk about, at least talents that I know are near and dear to your heart. We start with Yuri Perez, who's obviously no longer a prospect, having a little bit of an up and down return from Tommy John, which is to be expected. We've seen moments where he looks like as good as there is in the league, and then there's been some rough moments more lately. But ultimately, you feel good that that's going to be a long-term player, both at the major league level and for the Florida Marlins, the Miami Marlins. I'm seeing all this teal's got my brain messed up. But in the DSL, a lot of big names that are really emerging. Let's start with Kevin DeFrank, the right-handed pitcher, big dude.
Yep.
You want to talk about physicality, and he only 17 years old. He's already throwing triple digits and making guys look silly. What do you see with DeFrank?
Yeah, this looks right. In terms of just across the board, you pull up the prospect page, you look at the video, and he's that big and physical already. I think at signing he was 6'5", 202. So like that's at signing. Usually you look at that, and like now it's probably closer to 240, 250 and strong, big, like kind of big wingspan coming at you. It's just, but yes, the velocity is always going to get a 17-year-old throwing 100 miles an hour. It's going to ring bells, but there's also some pitchability here, right? Like there's good, strong opening DSL season. It doesn't always go that way for the DSL pitcher. And this player's whose amateur journey was not straightforward, kind of like an up and down overall amateur process. But
we're saying amateur meaning before signing,
before even signing, right? Like he's a popular player, but it's also like can be not polarizing, but just he's popular. It's pitching that's going to cost you a good amount of money to acquire, right? At that amateur level. So there's a lot of other considerations. Your physical process, your medical process is extra like diligent. There are things that would have made him just a kind of, it's a difficult scouting selection. It's a difficult move, but now it doesn't look so difficult. And kudos to the Marlins international acquisition and development group to get him to net out at a point where a 17-year-old is showing triple digits, throwing strikes, missing bats in the Dominican Summer League, and not having a rough first season and first go at it. That means there's some good things happening there on both the intake and the development side and the preparation side in order to net that out. And the Marlins, I think they have like 4 or 5 names that are in that top DSL prospect range. Yep. And most like the good amount of pitchers there. And the pitchers also look like big, physical. It's good to see, because I think that those are a lot of things that I felt I chased, and like principles that you zeroed in on philosophically and tried to implement, and knowing the guys that are there doing a lot of that work, I'm really happy for them and proud of them to be netting out. The best you can hope for as international group, in my opinion, give your GM trade chips, give your GM, like, develop enough players so that the arc is so long. You as an international director, maybe you're in the chair by the time that player 6 years down the road becomes maybe. But it's so fluid that I think the best you can hope for and the best work that you can control is like, how can I put enough assets into the Dominican Summer League to where my general manager feels like he can make trades based on projectable young, like Latin American players. If that guy can cement a trade like Santiago Suarez, that name might not mean much, right? He's a pitcher with Tampa Bay Rays, but Santiago Suarez helps you acquire Xavier Edwards, who then like kind of becomes a player for you to build around. And that to me that's real value too. Even if it's you sign the player, he gets there as a Marlin, he becomes a really good player as a Marlin. There's kind of value points below that. And I think that's what the Marlins have done in short order, like to have a stacking of guys that have major league value, prospect value out of the DSL, out of your lowest level, those are optimal outcomes. That and like the Jesus Made, where guys skyrocket to be in the top prospect. But remember a guy by the name of Harlan Susana completes the Juan Soto deal for the Padres, right? And Harlan Susana looked a lot like Kevin DeFrank, I think. I like DeFrank's delivery better. but it was like a flame-throwing DSL starting pitcher. So I think Kevin DeFrank is holding a lot of high upside value, comparable to some of the value that Yuri Perez had and held as a. He's got to do more. Yuri Perez was a special. Yuri Perez was always very good, always threw really good strikes. But I think with DeFrank here, he's already far more physical, like strength-wise, than most 17-year-old prospects I've ever seen.
Yeah, Harlan Susana is somebody I think it's only a matter of time here. I mean, he's pumping 102 at the upper levels. Really had an incredible month of August. I could see him if he's healthy, because it appears he had some kind of injury recently. You hope it's. Is
he throwing starter innings? Or
he had a lat strain.
Okay.
So he'll sit for a minute. Hopefully nothing too bad, but he's been really pitching well. A guy like DeFrank, before I move on, and you got a few guys, both not only on this DSL list, guys that maybe didn't show up on the list, guys that are stateside already, that came from this mold. But a guy like DeFrank, he's listed at over 200 pounds. He looks significantly over 200 pounds, not because he's heavy, not because of any kind of negative. He's just a big dude and he's tall. When a guy's that big at a young age, are you aggressive in kind of a conditioning plan to make sure, hey, you look good now, but you go the wrong direction, it can go sideways fast just because you're so naturally heavy?
I believe in aggressive physical development anyway. I think as a standard for players, like I think stronger, faster is better almost always. Instead of in the case of, do you compromise mobility in order to do those things? Right? Like I think to the limits of your individual pliability, but I think overall across the board, you should be aggressive with everybody's physicality. Guys that maybe end up thicker and guys that maybe look like they're going to stay skinny. Both merit like aggressive strength and conditioning, nutrition, but they look different. Those plans look different. So I would imagine, because everybody, like if you're the strength and conditioning coordinator with the Miami Marlins and you're coordinating the strength of one of the top prospects in baseball, which he is, just if you're 16, 17 years old throwing strikes in the DSL, you are one of the top prospects, even if you haven't done enough to, you're at least one of the top talents.
Right.
Maybe, right. So if you're a strength and conditioning coordinator, like that's going to be the one that's going to be the plan you get really aggressive about, or you get really detailed, or you get a lot of questions about. So yeah, I think it should always be prioritized though, not really special in this case because he's predisposed maybe. Cause I've seen guys that, maybe like the eye test doesn't indicate that they're strong, but the actual measurements and the actual plan knows that he is. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like there are guys that maybe like, physically they don't kind of like look in the kind of shape that they're actually in. And I think that cuts both ways. Skinny guys can be really, really strong, and kind of like big, let's call them fluffier guys can also be very, very strong and athletic. So I've watched it on all ends of the spectrum.
Name that I'm not as familiar with. It came in 17 on this list. DeFrank was third of Baseball America's top players in the DSL, or top prospects in the DSL. Righty from Cuba, no relation, Adriano Marrero. So ground ball pitcher, double plus on the breaking ball, according to certain scouts, potential at least. I'm not familiar with this player. Was this someone that you were involved with while you were with the Marlins? Was you kind of laying the groundwork? Cuban scouting in general is kind of an interesting process. What can you tell me about Marrero?
I can tell you that it really looks right? Like it's another like long, loose, like physical, projectable pitcher that didn't at all fall on his face in his first time going through the DSL, going through the first layer of pro baseball. I can't stress that enough. That is a really hard thing to be playing non-organized baseball for a long, long time. And now you're playing professional baseball with real stats, like that has a wide variety of outcomes. So to have two guys in your intake class go right, and then have it validated by external sources, which means people are coming in and writing good scouting reports on them when they go see your DSL team, and Fangraphs writers are coming to like those kinds of things have a way to increase value even beyond like what the objective value should be based on the analytic data. If I don't remember him in particular.
January sign, which means he's moving fast coming out of Cuba.
Again, those very talented individuals that took over and kind of were in roles like that we worked together, collaborated together for a long, long time. Like those are their signings by every measure. But it's good to see that like scouting principles that I agree with anyway. They looks right to me. You guys are doing like a hell of a job, like spotting like big physical pitchers that throw strikes and have athletic deliveries and are projectable still. And then on the development side, getting those guys to throw strikes in their first year in the DSL, man, I wish I could tell you how hard that is. Like you don't know if a guy's going to throw strikes in the Dominican Summer League. It's a tough one. It goes south for guys before it goes north in a lot of cases, you know, and it's the thing that limits. There's a lot of really talented, like if you just looked into this system and you looked at total stuff, pitchers, there's a lot of really talented guys. Now, can you in development keep them in the strike zone? That's I think one of the stories here is the development arc of getting young guys, 16, 17-year-old players to throw strikes and miss bats at their first professional level. So it's a lot of scouting, but it's a lot of development too.
Some more names here as we roll down the list of players that Baseball America recognizes top 35 in the Dominican Summer League. So Pedro Montero, righty for the Marlins, Dominican kid, 97 miles an hour, missing a lot of bats with his sweeper and his changeup. Smaller guy, different than some of these giants that we're talking about. What do you know about Pedro Montero, and how do we visualize this player and what he does?
What I will bet, knowing what I know about like the group and how they look at players, I bet he will have like checked the box in terms of having good data and a good delivery. And if he's 6'1" or 6 foot, then he's got to do some. That means like that he showed something, you know, in terms of like, yeah, this may be more of a traditional medium frame type, but there's stuff like what's coming out of the hand here is either velocity wise elite or TrackMan data, fastball movement characteristics, very good. So again, another 36 innings, 44 strikeouts, and only 14 walks in his first go through the Dominican Summer League. If you're the Marlins, like this is what you would hope in a dream scenario, that your intake systems provide you on both sides right now, right? Yeah, I think it's easy to get caught up in like, well, a team has a bad record and therefore like they're equals bad team. And that's not always true. And there's different windows and cycles, but in this long range way, we're talking about 16, 17-year-old kids. Like there's still a variety of outcomes that could happen, but this is as good as you could hope for through that. Like if you're being asked to be, okay, is my amateur system overall giving me players to work with that have major league value? And I'm thinking to a certain extent it does. And then that's on the heels of Yuri Perez. So you can, okay, pitchers can move through this system. Yeah. And so you can acquire them and think about it more plug and play. I wouldn't be surprised if the Marlins get to a more competitive place, these are the guys included in trades because they're further away.
So as we go to Jose Polino, you look at the ERA.
Him I remember clearly.
Yes, let's talk about this guy. So 29th on the DSL list. Interesting kind of statistical profile. Started 12 games, so not the biggest sample. 4.7 ERA. You say, okay, whatever. But 38 innings pitched, 13 strikeouts per 9. Yeah, 13 strikeouts per 9. Yeah. The walk rate is manageable, 4.7 per 9. And big, again, another big physical guy. This one jumped out to me. Yeah. 0 homers allowed in 38 innings. Yeah. So what do you tell me about Jose Polino?
This one is another one that it checked the boxes. Him I remember clearly because he's a very charismatic kid with a big smile and just had a really nice overall process in getting to evaluate the player. And really one of those total efforts, like area scout identifies him, Dominican supervisor brings him to the front. You cross-check him as a team. Everybody likes it, checks out with pretty good data. You hope he throws enough strikes for this to play. But he was big, physical, with a banger 12-6 breaking ball. It doesn't surprise me that at the DSL level, they're not like teeing off on him. He's going to be the only thing that keeps him from having success. So taking a jump from 13 walks in 21 innings to 20 walks in 38 innings, retaining a high swing and miss rate, that's exciting. 4.7 is still too high to carry into A ball, double A. Like you're not going to have the success you want there, or you're going to get put in a reliever bucket if you do.
Right.
And you want to stay in that starter category, starter profile as long as you can. And Jose Paulino has the physical characteristics, not like a super explosive, loose delivery. He's just more like big, strong, coming at you with like velocity and a big power curveball it does that. Sometimes curveballs get you to like react. He's got one of those.
Let me ask you just to understand, because I mean, reading Dominican Summer League stats for me is tricky. Just understanding what is appropriate for the level.
Yep.
So a walk rate on a prospect like this, it's a hard throwing pitcher in his teenage years. What are you looking at as far as, okay, we can work with that at the, of course, he's striking out people left and right, and he's probably higher than you want. Like, what are you looking at here for a pitcher like this with this kind of profile where you say, all right, this is above the threshold of what we can work with at this point in his career, teenager, DSL?
I think anything with a 4 on it, you're starting to get into problematic territory. So if you start getting deeper beyond that, you can't pitch in a game.
Even at this age. Yep.
At this age, I have a high, like you see the rates. Guys can make the jump out of having really ugly walk rates, but it's not in the majority. It's not common. Usually the strike throwers have some ability to throw strikes and have to like make that progression, establish that progression. So if I see a high, something close to 5, I'm already like, all right, you got to start going the other direction fast and compromise some stuff to get there.
Yeah.
You know, let's not prioritize the velocity development over the command development, for example.
Right.
There's plenty of velocity, plenty of stuff. How do you prioritize command? And to get from 5.6 to 4.7, keeping your strikeout rates high and keeping your stuff good, I think bodes very well for his trajectory that it's moving forward. I also think it used to be like a slight against a DSL prospect to repeat the level.
Mm-hmm.
This is when we had 2 short season rookie ball teams. Teams had more major league affiliates. And therefore now in this day and age, you're holding a little bit before you make the promotion to the Gulf Coast League or to the Arizona League, because they can't go back. That's a new major league rule. If you get promoted to the United States from the Dominican, you can't get sent back to the Dominican. So you have to graduate, stay there, and justify a spot on those rosters to stay. So it's been harder than ever to graduate prospects. That's why I think you've seen Luis Cova, for example.
Yeah,
probably one of their better position
players. About to
players.
ask about him, yeah.
This would be his 2nd year. And it used to be that you looked at guys who played in the DSL twice. It's like, okay, why did he play twice? If you're good, they get you out of there. But now that's changed with the contraction of the minor leagues into, or at least the downsizing of total roster spots. So, but guys at that level, sometimes they need 2 years in the Dominican Summer League before they're ready for stateside baseball. And I'm glad that that's a decision that was made with him, because you can get here and it can never find yourself again. And then you find yourself on a release list way quicker than you want to be. So
I want to ask about somebody who's not on this list. Well, before we do that, actually, there's one more name on the list I want to get to, because there's a new name for me, which is Luis Arana, contact merchant, second baseman, 5'10", 154. Your style of player, right? Venezuelan kid. I'm sure he was told he was the next Altuve at some point. This is your favorite type of player, knowing you. But obviously, the guy's performed at a high level and is showing a lot. I think of Sanoja. Second time I've mentioned him on this show, but he was a guy that went through the system very quickly as a versatile infielder, smaller guy, but a great contact hitter.
Yep.
What do you know about Luis Arana? Is this someone that you were part of the process with? I know when we talked to some sources in that organization, they mentioned this guy, and it was a new name, at least for me.
No, I don't remember this player, and I actually think that it's a testament of like the complete job that's being done in terms of like there's a partiality to physicality, but there's a nimbleness to adapt and adjust to the player that doesn't necessarily fit that, because he's showing an outlier tool. And I think in order for him to have real value, it can't be driven by the defensive value. early on. Like Javi Sanoja had to hit through every level to prove that he was there. And so this is a good start. Low punch, high on base, with some extra base power. You know, out of a smaller medium frame, maybe there's some juice in here that is not indicated in the stature or the size.
Last guy I want to get to, for then we got some Marlins fans that watch the show. I hope I'm pronouncing the first name right. Ivor Mosqueda. So he's not on the list, but he was someone that when we talking to people, his name came out very quickly. 18 years old, so he's a little older, but really a young player coming out of Venezuela. Caja Seca, 6'2", 175. Looks like a pretty strong kid. Nine games, 6 starts, 2.45 ERA, 10.1 strikeouts per 9, 2.5 walk rate. And the performance is there. WHIP 105.7. Any intel on Mosquera? Tell me about Mosquera, because he was a name that I'd never heard, but it was brought to me as a guy to watch.
I remember Aver very well. It was kind of a Western Venezuela area process. I think you've met on our draft show. Manny Padron came on the draft show, and this was a guy that I remember hashing it out with Manny quite a bit on in terms of justifying the scout. Like, this was a really wiry athlete. He showed a lot of pitcher's traits, but I remember he had a really short, there's just kind of like a short arm swing in the back. It's one of those pitchers you have to be like, okay, I don't love how it looks out back, but how does it look out front? And it's really like, it's not really about the takeaway. Ubaldo Jimenez used to have a really ugly, but it would come out clean. So it was a guy you really had to okay, this isn't kind of how it's drawn up. There's some short armers in the big leagues. Joe Kelly, remember, shortened his arm stroke to that. And Aver Mosquera did that. So it's immediately like a jarring, different delivery. But then you look at the TrackMan readings, you're like, yeah, there's good stuff going on here. And he's throwing strikes. Aver is not in the category. He's a strike thrower with good data. That has also the athlete, him getting stronger. And you're saying he's 18, he's older. Yeah, he's had Tommy John already. He's missed a year due to that. So that's another thing we've been seeing a lot of across Major League Baseball, younger Tommy Johns, younger, more frequent. So this is something we're going to navigate. And I think he didn't get to start his professional career on time. He kind of started on the shelf. And those guys, it takes them a little more while to establish. But we just talked about 4, 5, 17 to 18-year-old, 16, 17, 18-year-old starting pitcher prospects. So you got to like what's going on over there for sure.
Yeah, Peter Bendix, I'm sure happy with potential long-term guys. And like you mentioned at the top, trade chips if he wants to make a move. So listen, we're almost at 2 hours, but we start talking about Marlins, DSL. That's my sweet spot. I could talk about all day. I know that's your kind of area of expertise. So I'm glad we didn't get too deep in the bag. I already had like 7 names to ask about.
Canes, Cats, Heat, probably active asking about the guys in the system. And it's not lost on me, the guys who ask on a granular level and comment on a granular level. I just want to give a pause and a moment for the people who are sitting here commenting, taking time out of their day to talk baseball with us. This is the fun part for me. It's the setup and the production, and shout out Junior back there for hanging with us for two full hours. But I just got to give credit to the whole team, the whole operation. And man, it's fun talking baseball with you on Mondays.
Absolutely, brother. Stay tuned. Every week, getting more and more important. We'll be there through the postseason and beyond. Hot Stove, World Baseball Classic. We're every week. We're not stopping. El Big League Show. Like and subscribe.
Sheesh.
Sheesh.